Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners Board Briefing. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. For those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you've been speaking so that the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks. And for all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. I did want to point out that we're having some issues with our projector right here in the boardroom, which means the slides will not be able to be shown behind us as per usual in these meetings. There are some printed out copies of the slide decks at the dais for all of you if you need help with that. And Tasia will still move through the slides so that we'll be able to see them on some of the television screens on the other side of the room. Our first briefing this morning is an informational briefing on the Oregon Historical Society levy expenditures and impact from the Levy Oversight Committee. It is always great, and I want to thank you all for being here this morning. Every year the board gets a briefing on the Levy Oversight Committee on all the great work that is happening at the 5 historical organizations we have across the county. And I do want to note that this year it feels especially salient given what we've seen at the federal level to erase, censor, and sanitize our history at national parks and national historic sites across the country. We know whose stories are being targeted: signs documenting slavery, the incarceration of Japanese Americans, references to trans and queer people, indigenous history, and climate change have been removed from public display in service to a whitewashed and glorified version of American history. These actions are a disservice to our public imagination and an insult to our ability to hold complex truth, and it endangers our communities, because if it is possible to edit stories, experiences, ideas, and whole groups of people out of the past, it becomes that much easier to edit or erase them from the present or even the future. With that in mind, the work of our historians, librarians, archivists, and volunteers at historical institutions like the one before us today become all the more important. Their dedication to telling the whole story accurately and without bias shapes our understanding of who we are and inspires curiosity around where we have been and what is yet to come. I'm so appreciative that Multnomah County residents feel the same way and have passed and hopefully will continue to renew this local levy to support this essential work. With that, I am happy to pass it over to committee co-chair Diane McKeel. Thank you for being here, and welcome back to the county as a former county commissioner. It's always wonderful to have you in this room.
Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to be here. So good morning to all of you. For the record, my name is Diane McKeel, and it is my privilege to serve as co-chair of the Historical Organization Levy Oversight Committee. And I'm joined today by my co-chair, Jan Dilge, and by representatives of the 5 history organizations that received monies from the levy. As commissioners, you know that the LOC was originally created following the passage of the historic levy by Multnomah County voters in November of 2010. Since then, the 5-year levy has been renewed by voters in May 2016 and May 2021, both times by overwhelming margins. The current membership of the LOC was appointed by former Chair Kafoury following the May 2021 renewal. The LOC is charged with ensuring accountability of the expenditures of levy funds by the 5 history organizations that receive levy proceeds: the Oregon Historical Society, the Gresham Historical Society, the Troutdale Historical Society, the Crown Point Historical Society, and the East County History Organization. At the inception of the levy, each of the 4 East County organizations receives $37,500 annually. Over time, that number has increased to $55,000 annually. Under a memorandum of understanding, each East County organization submits to the LOC a twice-yearly report on the expenditure of these funds. As we approach the levy renewal, Co-Chair Dilge and I thought it might be helpful if we invited a leader from each of the 4 East County organizations to provide a very quick highlight or 2 of operations and programs supported by the levies. We are joined first by Sandy Cardasur of the Crown Point Country Historical Society, which just opened their new museum, is fabulous, and Sylvie Andrews, Executive Director of the Gresham Historical Society. So I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Vega Peterson, Commissioners, Chair McKeel, Dilge, and guests. My name is Sandy Cartiser. I'm the treasurer of the Crown Point Country Historical Society, and I'm here to tell you on behalf of the society what the tax levy has done for us. A bit of history. In August of '70, a dedicated group filed to become a historical society. With a small membership, limited funds, a lot of enthusiasm, and a dream to have a museum in the Corbett area someday, they forged ahead. The next generation took the helm, carrying the ball, so to speak, to fulfill that dream. Our quest started in 2012, searching for a suitable location for a new museum. In early 2013, we negotiated and secured an agreement for the 2.69-acre former auto camp property from the late teens. In 2014, we started the lengthy land use process and were required to do an archaeological dig. We are pleased to say we met all the qualifications and were granted the building permit late October of 2017. Building design and plans were implemented with the help of the levy funds so that we could break ground when the weather permitted in April of 2018. Construction began, taking us along many avenues. Building was accomplished through funds of a member's estate, the levy funds, many varied fundraisers, grants, and in-kind contributions and donations by the membership, community, and beyond, while the many volunteers worked hard and long to accomplish the completion of the museum. We are proud to state that the completion of the museum has been done without debt. What a great feeling. The levy funds has allowed CPCHS to, in addition to the property payments and the design and plans for the building, the following: built a climate-controlled archival room in the museum to protect the collections, installed a backup generator to protect the building contents during inclement weather, implemented the unique deck, ramp, and mezzanine railing system using the turn-of-century railroad iron and hydro plant piping from our area. It's a must-see. Republishing of the area's historical stories of the pioneers' way of life during the journey and the living in the communities of East County. Being able to purchase the needed archival supplies to properly preserve the Charles W. Post art collection, design and plan the replica of a traditional longhouse, prepare and implement a plan to move a historical monument to the property, printing of our brochures featuring our brick programs for the many pathways that will be placed on the museum grounds, supplemental donations to help in setting up the varied exhibits for our open house and immediate future. As you can see by the photos showing our accomplishments, how the tax levy funds have played a major role in our success in making a dream come true. Crown Point History would like to thank the commissioners past and present for their support and trust, as well as Multnomah County voters who with broad support for the tax levy measures made this happen. We look forward to hosting the commissioners and oversight committee on the tour of East County Historical Societies in the near future. Thank you again for the opportunity to share what the tax levy has done for us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Sylvie Andrews, and I am the Executive Director of the Gresham Historical Society. First of all, on behalf of the board, volunteers, and myself, I thank the Multnomah County voters for their continued support of OHS and the 4 East County museums. Levy funding is critical to our mission to preserve and share Gresham's past to enrich its present and future. This year, we've delivered on that promise in a variety of ways. We accepted and processed 30 donations of documents, photos, and other cultural resources in 2024, and 25 donations so far in 2025. Many of these resources are now available online through a partnership with Northwest Digital Heritage. Over 4,500 people from Gresham, Oregon, and all over the world have visited the museum so far this year. We are open 5 days per week, and admission is free to everyone during regular hours. In addition to rotating exhibits, GHS offers free walking tours of historic cemeteries and local architecture, both of which take place every month throughout the summer. We also put on a monthly lecture series featuring topics of local and statewide interest. Most of these talks are now available on our YouTube channel. GHS owns 2 historic buildings in downtown Gresham, the 1913 Gresham Library, now the museum, and the 1931 Zion Church, now a restaurant. We are in the midst of several grant-funded projects to repair and maintain these buildings, preserving their place in Gresham's architectural legacy. By far, our biggest event this year has been the Indigenous Arts Festival, which took place just this past weekend. This event is in its 2nd year, and its success is a testament to the power of collaboration. With organizational support from the Portland Indigenous Marketplace and Gresham Outdoor Public Art, and funding from the City of Gresham and the Multnomah County Cultural Coalition, the festival brought around 3,000 people to the museum grounds to browse artist booths, watch drumming and dancing performances, and listen to speakers. We are excited to bring this program back for its 3rd year in 2026. Levy funding plays a crucial role in all of these programs by supporting our 1 permanent staff position. We have more planned for 2026, which is not only the U.S. semi-quincentennial, but also our 50th anniversary as an organization. With the help of the levy, we're building a solid foundation for the next 50 years and beyond. As the executive director and on behalf of the board and volunteers, I look forward to continuing our partnership in service to the people of Multnomah County. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Sandy or Sylvie before we bring up our next 2 presenters?
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner Jones-Lixon.
Just curious, the Zion Church, is that where Spinella's?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great happy hour and karaoke. An amazing vibe. I knew there was a reason why. So thank you for the presentation, and looking forward to visiting the new site in Corbett as well. Thank you.
Okay, we will now be joined by Chris Garza, Executive Director of the Troutdale Historical Society, and Peggy Olin from the East County History Organization. And while they're coming up, we do have some other folks here in the audience that are part of the historical societies as well. So, yeah.
We appreciate everyone taking the time to be here this morning for the presentation. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. First of all, this wasn't part of my speech, but I'd like to congratulate Crown Point on their new museum. It's incredible, well done, and it's fantastic to see. So let me get back to this. My name is Christopher Garza. I'm the Executive Director of Troutdale Historical Society, which I'm honored to serve in that position. I'm here to express our deepest gratitude to you and the citizens of Multnomah County for supporting the Museum Levy Fund. Quite frankly, without this fund, our 3 museums in Troutdale, they would not be able to operate. It's tough. It's very tough. And speaking as someone who runs 3 museums on a budget smaller than many single-site museums, I can tell you every single dollar matters. This year, 2025, the Levy Fund has made possible some remarkable accomplishments, and in a few cases has helped us through some unexperienced challenges. Here are a few highlights. First, the fund allowed us to launch a brand new program for kids and families, the Columbia Kids Club. This free quarterly educational series brings history to life through hands-on activities and themes ranging from pioneers and indigenous peoples to fishing, art, and community. Families can spend a day learning about Troutdale's past without worrying about the cost, and as a father of 6, I know just how quickly family outings can break the bank. Free programs like this are priceless for our community, and the smiles on the kids' faces prove it. The Levy Fund also sustained our other free educational programs throughout the year, ensuring that history is accessible to everyone, not just to those who can afford a ticket price. Of course, no year comes without a few surprises. In 2025, we experienced a major computer system hack, which forced us to upgrade our technology from top to bottom. Thanks to the Levy Fund, we are now phasing out old desktop computers, moving towards a secure server system with physical firewalls, and building a much safer digital home for our collections and operations. It's not glamorous work, but it is essential to protecting our history. The largest use of the levy fund this year has gone towards critical repairs at our museums. At the Harlow House Museum, we addressed dangerous flooring issues, and at the Barn Exhibit Hall, we uncovered a severe water damage that turned out to be a very costly problem, expected to be upwards of about $50,000 in repairs. While we are actively fundraising to cover these expenses, I can say with confidence that without the support of the levy fund, these repairs would be impossible. In addition, the funding helps cover portions of our director's salary, me, and supports the everyday operations that keep our doors open. It may not sound as exciting as new exhibits or programs, but turning on the lights, paying the bills, and keeping the collection safe is the foundation of everything we do. Because of the levy fund, we've had record-breaking visitor numbers again this year, new memberships, and an increase in volunteers, and a surge of interest from local families. And while we love welcoming visitors from around the country, the most important thing to us is that people from right here in Multnomah County are connecting with their own history. So on behalf of the Troutdale Historical Society, our staff, our volunteers, and yes, all 6 of my children, we'd like to say thank you, commissioners, and thank you to the citizens of Multnomah County for believing in the value of history. With your support, we are preserving the past, engaging the present, and building a stronger future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. And then you can just, there you go. You're all set.
Good morning. I'm Peggy Ola, the East County Historical Organization president. The 1983 Heslin House Museum has had a very interesting life in its 132 years. From the initial building as a boarding house to a family home, it has seen many changes. The museum artifacts of the historical family, furniture, history, and from East County residents. The Heslin House and the 1915 City of Fairview Jail is also sitting on the Fairview Handy Park. And we had a fun celebration this year with the jail and the Fairview's first police car. Refreshments, balloons, banners. So everybody enjoyed themselves. We had crafts for kids and sidewalk quilting, and it was a good day. So, and our 1874 historical Zimmerman Heritage Farmhouse Museum, it had the home of 3 generations. The Zimmerman family lived there from 1874 to 1992, with the artifacts in the collection of all belonged to the family. Both of the houses have nice-sized gardens, and we maintain the gardens, and all the trees at the Zimmerman house are over 100 years old, as well as the Heslin house. We have lots of beautiful flowers, shrubs, fruit trees, and all planted by the families. Both of our houses this spring, we had Easter egg hunts, crafts for the kids, and crafts for the parents. So it's all, bringing the kids in with the parents has been good for us. They seem to watch for what we're doing, and there's always somebody new showing up. So one of the things we did in August, we had a high tea fundraiser in the gardens at the Zimmerman house. We had antique quilts from the house. Everyone enjoyed the tea and the old quilts that we had on display from the family as well as volunteers. And we have our historical outside scavenger hunt coming up, and our Christmas take a walk back in time with us. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the East County Historical Organization, ECHO, we thank you for the Mount Loma tax levy fund checks. We are deeply grateful that you continue, which to make a tremendous difference in the efforts to preserve the treasures, the stories, and the memories of the early founders of East Mount Loma County. We support the strengths and our ability to document their lives. Culture and historical records for the Heslin and the Zimmerman House, other pioneer families, and the future generations. We learned the rich history in this area. So, thank you. We don't know what we do without the levy fund either. The Zimmerman House has had some heating problems this year, and we're into a new furnace, and it's been very interesting. So of what they have found for us and not found, so, but they have, it's really helped us, and we're getting bids on a new roof for the Zimmerman House too. So if we didn't have them, we would not exist. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Chris or Peggy before I turn this over to Co-Chair Dilge?
I think, no, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Janice Dilch. I am one of the co-chairs of the LOC, and we are now going to turn our attention to the Oregon Historical Society. I can report that OHS continues to be in compliance with all levy language and requirements. These requirements include being open to the public a certain number of hours a week, providing an annual financial audit to the LOC, and of course, offering free admission every day to all Multnomah County residents. I am also pleased to report that the LOC continues to be impressed by how OHS is in total compliance with the levy language that requires their exhibits, programs, publications, and partnerships reflect the history of Multnomah County's diverse population. OHS's commitment to Multnomah County can also be seen in the fact that in June 2024, OHS opened up Rivers, Roses, and Rip City, a new permanent exhibit on the history of Portland. OHS Executive Director Carrie Timchuk joins us now to offer a few highlights of the past year.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Co-Chair, Madam Chairman, and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Carrie Timchuk, and my privilege to serve as Executive Director of the Oregon Historical Society. I joined with my 4 colleagues in thanking the voters of Multnomah County for overwhelmingly renewing the history levy in 2021 most recently. And as Co-Chair Dilge said, I am very proud of the work we have done and how we have honored the levy language and requirements. Levy funds have been instrumental in allowing us to fulfill our mission of preserving Oregon's history and making it accessible to everyone, and Multnomah County's history as well, which we did through the first ever permanent exhibit on the history of Portland. Pursuant to the levy language, all Multnomah County residents continue to have free admission to a world-class museum and research library. And I would echo what the chair said this morning, and I want a copy of your remarks, Chair. They were so eloquent. It's my belief that the mission and work of OHS has never been more important than today, a time when sharing the full history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is under attack. And there are those who would like to rewrite and whitewash history. I can assure the Commissioners of Multnomah County and residents too that through our exhibits, programs, and publications, OHS will continue to ensure that the true history of our state, this county, and all the diverse populations are told. And I think you can see that commitment in the exhibits currently being offered at OHS, along, of course, with the permanent Portland exhibit. Our showcase exhibit right now, which was done purposely as we move into the 250th anniversary, is an exhibit about the Yasui family, an American story, a Japanese family from Hood River who went through what all Japanese families on the West Coast had to go through after World War II with discrimination and internment. It's a beautiful exhibit and will run for much of next year. Our other temporary exhibit is She Flies With Her Own Wings, which is the golden age of Oregon aviation, and it focuses on the pioneering women pilots who were trained here in Portland. There was a piloting school in Portland, here, one of the biggest in the country, and it was ran by a fellow who was a good capitalist, and he just wanted tuition money. He didn't care who you were, and he took women students, where most piloting schools in the country back in the time did not accept women, and so many of the early women pioneering pilots were trained right here in Portland, and we tell their story. We've also partnered now for the next several months with Street Roots, the newspaper, celebrating their 25-year anniversary and telling the story of how it documents the history of the houseless and others here in Portland. And it features a collaborative storytelling project aimed at preserving the experiences of Portland's unhoused community. And then our photographic exhibit running now is We're All Living a Dream, Reflections on 20th Century Lesbian Feminism, through a great photography exhibit. And then coming soon, we will have a new exhibit talking about the Bernard Goldsmith, who was Portland's first Jewish mayor and who was very instrumental in the role of Washington Park and civic life here in Portland. So those are the exhibits we have up now and for the months ahead, and we look forward to continuing to work with the commissioners and sharing the story of Multnomah County.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I just really appreciate this. Any questions? Okay.
Julia, you got to have one. Quiz me here, so.
I know better not to quiz Carrie Timchuk. You're the man with all the answers. I'm just going to share my appreciation for you coming here and also for continuing to sort of elevate and amplify our history and the lessons we've learned from it. But I'm not going to ask you a question because I know you'll be able to answer it.
Commissioner Jones-Dixon, any comments?
Yeah, just again, want to extend my deep appreciation for the work that you're leading and just knowing that a lot of the, just seeing the historical context being captured there in East County, specifically through our 4 different destinations, is amazing. My kids and I, we visited 3 of them so far. We have to make it down to the Troutdale one here soon. So again, thank you for your support, and it's good to see some other folks from East County here as well as far as volunteers. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair Vega-Peterson, I know you were there last year. It's been my privilege to donate the pavilion of OHS for activities for some great organizations here in Multnomah County. The annual National Alliance of Mental Illness Awards ceremony, which you attended last year, is this coming Thursday night, and they'll be there in our pavilion again. So
That's great. Commissioner Moyer?
As somebody who is proud to have the Oregon Historical Society in her district, it is such a resource to our entire community, and I enjoy when I get a notice that there's a new exhibit and something new to see. So I continue to appreciate the work of the Oregon Historical Society and look forward to what's to come.
And I would say after 15 years now, we receive much less people coming in from Multnomah County and being surprised that they can come in for free for the first couple of years. No matter what we did, no matter every advertisement we make, everything we always say Multnomah County free admission, and there were people delighted to find out. But now people, I think, are coming in more and more saying we're here because we know it's free.
Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you. Just appreciate the presentation, but also want to acknowledge and thank the staff and volunteers. As a former executive director at Join, many of our folks who once recently housed folks really found this place to be very welcoming and a place to reconnect with community. And so I just want to uplift how critical that has been as part of our work, and just appreciate the work that your teams do in the day-to-day and making sure everybody feels welcome when they come into the space. Thank you.
Thank you, and just want to thank everyone again for all your work, for being here today, but just really making sure that we in Multnomah County have a chance to really explore and understand our history, especially as it helps guide all of the things that we are dealing with today. For the board, based on the regular renewal calendar, next year in the May election, the OHS levy option would be up for renewal, so that will be coming before our board. The board does need to approve that to go on there, and so we're planning to do that before the end of this calendar year. I hope our voters will continue to support the levy. We know it makes a difference and help continue all the great work that is happening there. So thank you all so much. I know that we are still the invitation always stands to come out and tour the OHS or some of the East County historical buildings, and so we definitely want to make sure that we take you up on that when we can with their schedule.
And I still think there's maybe 1 or 2 of you who have not been to the vault, the 100,000 book warehouse. Julie, you haven't been there yet, so.
Do not miss that.
So
Yeah.
we'll get you out there. And speaking of staff, Madam Chair, I also want to praise on your staffer who's been your liaison to us. He's really been a delight and a pleasure to work with.
Yeah, he's great, and we just appreciate everything that he does. So thank you so much for mentioning that, Carrie. Appreciate that. Thank you all so much. Appreciate that, and we will hear more later this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we are going to take a brief recess as we rearrange the room for a work session. We are continuing our conversations on the impacts of state, federal, and other funding changes to the county's FY26 budget. So we will reconvene in 5 minutes. We are in recess. Thank you, everyone. While we switched into work session format, we are now going to start our work session around the state rebalance, state, federal, and other funding changes to the county's FY26 budget. We're going to go ahead and begin with an overview of the county's pretrial monitoring and closed street supervision programs. We'll have that from Sarah Mullen and Judge Greenlick, who is joining us this morning. Thank you guys both for making the time to do that.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Mullen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council. I use she, her pronouns, and I am joined by Multnomah County Chief Criminal Judge Michael Greenlick. We are going to do some high-level overview of the county's pretrial monitoring to give some background to the conversation that we've been having, and then a little bit on the future planning that LIPSC's been leading over the past couple of years. So the agenda today, we're going to talk through the current structure, really keep it fairly high level, talk about the pretrial subcommittee, that's a subcommittee of LIPSC, and then the judge is going to talk a little bit about the potential system impact to the closure of Close Street with the 4 to 6 month timeline that was proposed. We'll talk a little bit about some enhanced pretrial practices, and then some next steps and resource needs that are really focused around thinking about a thoughtful transition to a new program so that we still have the option of releasing folks into the community who are pre-adjudicated while they're going through the pretrial process. Next slide. So just for the background, so Multnomah County has 2 distinct pretrial monitoring programs, the Pretrial Services Program through the Department of Community Justice, and then the Closed Street Program under the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Prior to the implementation of the public safety assessment in 2023, cases were assigned to PSP or Closed Street based on charge, with lower level charges going to PSP, and then the more serious charges going to Closed Street. And that was using an agreed upon sort of list of charges to send folks to one or the other agency. In 2019, we applied for a Safety and Justice Challenge grant, a $2 million grant, and the LIPSC agreed that we should use that grant to look at our pretrial system. And so we started that process with a full assessment of our pretrial system by Justice System Partners. They interviewed system partners, they looked at our programs and policies, they did some administrative data review, and provided us with recommendations for improvement to better align our system with best practices. We used those recommendations to create a roadmap for our project moving forward. One of the key recommendations from that report that we implemented after a couple years of planning in 2023 was the public safety assessment. And that was replacing the prior assessment we were using, which was the Modified Virginia Pretrial Risk Assessment Instrument. One of the biggest changes and the most important changes when we implemented the public safety assessment is that it allowed us to do universal assessment of all individuals who were booked into custody on new Multnomah County charges. Prior to implementing the PSA, we were actually only getting risk information on about 60% of individuals coming into our jail. So we had a large population of individuals who had lower level charges that were coming in and just being released without any risk assessment information at all. So now we have risk assessment, which assesses the likelihood of new criminal activity while on pretrial release, and then successful court appearance. With that PSA implementation, we use it now to recommend Closed Street or PSP and pretrial monitoring level kind of based on that assessed risk rather than based on charge. So we have, low level, kind of level 1 folks recommended to go to PSP, and then higher level, levels 2 through 3+, going to Closed Street. So the bulk of the higher level risk cases are going to Closed Street. And there's also room in there for judicial discretion. And so the PSA is used as a tool to help judges make decisions, to inform their decisions around pretrial release, but it is not making the decisions for the judges. So that's important to note, just because we do see often that judges are not following the recommendation of the tool and often actually increasing the level of recommended supervision. And I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing high levels of cases at Close Street. Next slide. So this is our basic pretrial monitoring reporting levels. As part of our project to implement the PSA, we also wanted to standardize the way that folks reported to pretrial and really shift the model from what we had previously called pretrial supervision to pretrial monitoring. And the reason for that is what we had seen prior to 2019 when we had the assessment done, excuse me, is that we were often seeing conditions and reporting requirements that mirrored post-conviction, post-prison supervision. And with pretrial, we're really talking about a pre-adjudicated population that has not yet been convicted of a crime. And so we placed an emphasis on having the least restrictive conditions to ensure successful court appearance and no new arrests while on pretrial release. So emphasizing the court appearance and community safety. This is basically how folks are reporting in, and it's a lot of phone check-ins, and that's what we're doing, with increasing levels of check-ins as you have an increase in levels of supervision, with the highest level, level 3+, having also the option of putting on more restrictive conditions like electronic monitoring or SCRAM, which is alcohol monitoring, as well as an option for in-person check-ins with individuals. Next slide. As we've made these shifts, we've seen really skyrocketing numbers at Close Street, partially because we have more individuals who are eligible for monitoring, because now we're getting risk assessment information on a larger population of individuals. We also are seeing some deviation from the recommendation of the PSA. And so as the Sheriff's Office has noted, they have more than double their caseload since fall 2022. So that's a really unmanageable caseload for them to be able to engage in both the basic monitoring that I outlined in the previous slide, but also any enhanced services or kind of responsive services that the deputies may see that their clients need to help them be successful on pretrial release. I'll say another challenge is a real lack of accessible data and regular data reporting from either agency. So it's really hard for us to be able to track our progress and track success measures because we don't have shared outcome metrics that we're using for pretrial release, and the systems that we're using make it really challenging to get out consistent data. And then we have a real limited availability of supportive services, and we have no warm handoff to our pretrial agencies. And I think that's important to note. The Justice System Partners report that came out last week, it came out without enough time for me to incorporate it into these slides. But one thing that's really, that you'll see in there is that there's a number of people, a significant number of people who aren't even making their first appointment with pretrial. And I think that's really indicative of a system failure in that we are not providing that warm handoff or enough support to even get them into that first place where they could potentially access support. And so I think that's just one challenge that we're seeing. And this is only a couple of the challenges. There are a number of other significant challenges that we're seeing in our pretrial monitoring system, as I think the sheriff's outlined, and we've heard from other partners. Next slide. So in response to a lot of these challenges, the LPSC pretrial subcommittee was launched in 2023, and that consists of partners from the district attorney's office. We have 2 judges, we have trial court administration staff, public defenders, health department representation, DCJ, the sheriff's office, and a justice fellow. And the LPSC pretrial subcommittee really focused on how to improve pretrial monitoring so that we could increase successful court appearance, decrease new criminal activity, and also increase stakeholder trust in our pretrial system, which has been a real challenge. And with that kind of subcommittee launching, our plan was to hopefully have a proposal to put forward so that we could implement something in 2027. This, of course, got accelerated with the sheriff's proposal, but I think one thing that's important is that We have a collaborative group of stakeholders that have been engaging and working on this for the last year. And so even though this is faster than maybe we had intended, there is a group who is already engaged in this work and really interested in seeing a system that shows more success. And so we started talking in the pretrial subcommittee about what was working in our current system, what's not working, and then what we would want to see in our future system. And then went through an exercise where we prioritized what we would want to see in our future system so we could think about where we would really want to focus. Along with that, we've done a number of site visits to other counties and had other counties come and present, including Clackamas County, San Francisco, Queens, New York, and we are going to Tucson, Arizona to Pima County next week to look at their pretrial services. Next slide. So the themes that came out of that, the highest priority system enhancement that folks want are peer services, case management services, really services that wrap individuals in support, so supportive services and access to that, and really helping folks address some of the barriers to their unsuccessful court appearances in the past. And then high priority is also access to existing county services, recognizing that there's a number of services that we fund in the county that people want the pretrial population to have access to. Data, so regularly reporting on data and sharing some performance indicators so that we can check in on how we're doing regularly. And then a unified structure. Our bifurcated system of pretrial monitoring is creating a number of challenges, both for system partners, but also for individuals who are being monitored in terms of consistency, availability of just information, and kind of understanding where and how to report.
Sarah, can I just jump in?
Please.
Usually our work sessions, are we doing that where we can just
Oh, yeah.
talk during? Okay.
Happy to.
It changes sometimes. On the piece around access to existing county services, do we know how many people on pretrial release are already clients of other county services, whether that's DCHS or their contracted providers like the public defender's case managers or something of that nature, or homeless services department, contractors, or our health department? Do we actually have a sense for where there already is overlap as opposed to they need access to services?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have that information, and I'm happy to follow up with DCJ and MCSO to see if they have that information. My guess would be it would be limited, just based on their engagement with individuals on pretrial and kind of the lack of that needs assessment and connection to services currently.
Thank you. I would say that to me would be a critical piece. And again, I don't know that you just carry this, but I think it's something of not knowing that universe of how much is they need access to programs they don't already have, and how much is we actually just need to do case coordination. And it almost feels like a quick fix here is some interdisciplinary team-like approach to case staffing some of these folks.
I will say that I don't know the number. Oh, I'm sorry. I will say this is Judge Greenlick. We don't know the number. I don't know the number, but it's definitely knowable. There are any number of folks who are released on pretrial supervision who are also already being supervised on another case by DCJ. And what we do in those situations is have those people be monitored by DCJ so they can work both on the probation plan. They obviously have access to services in most of those situations.
Thank you.
I did just get a note from Director Pena that for the pretrial services program, that type of information isn't tracked for folks, so that might be something to look into.
Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to the judge here to talk about the potential impact of the Close Street closure and really the potential impact of a closure without that transition plan, so that quick closure proposal.
Good morning, Chair Vega Peterson and commissioners. Excuse me. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like to be a judge in these situations. Most of the people that are low risk and don't have a significant history of failing to appear, which there's a significant number of those folks, they get released before they even come to see a judge. And so that's not the population we're talking about. We're talking about folks, both misdemeanors and felonies, who have failed to appear, many, many times before, sometimes dozens of times, who also are facing relatively serious charges. You know, stealing cars, eluding police, having guns in the cars, dealing drugs, low-level robberies. These are the types of cases where judges have a release decision to make. And we have to primarily be concerned with, you know, is the person going to reoffend, and is the person going to come to court? And for most of those folks, they have a history of both reoffending and not coming to court. And so it can really be a difficult decision. And when a judge knows that for the people with higher risk of doing either of those things is in front of them, and that we have a system like closed street supervision, it at least gives you some assurance that somebody is paying attention, both to whether they've had police contact during the time they've been in supervision, but also to maybe monitor programs like GPS or SCRAM for folks that shouldn't be using alcohol because they have a repeat DUI offense. And so these are hard decisions to make because, you know, judges, you know, understand what it's like for someone to be released into the community and then victimize somebody else. And so I've been kind of running this by some judges, like what would happen if closed street supervision disappeared in the next 4 to 6 months. And one judge said to me, "Are you kidding me? Every DV case that gets released, we release to closed street supervision so victims have somebody they can call and talk to if there's been a problem." And there's a belief that judges just wouldn't be willing to take that risk and that many more people would be held in custody. And of course, if we hold many more people in custody, that puts pressure on the system in ways that we're already feeling under pressure. Obviously, more people in jail mean, you know, we might bump up against overcrowding and folks having to be released on matrix release. We're already having problems with lawyers having the ability to go visit their clients in jail because of staffing in the jail. So that raises both practical problems in terms of the case going forward, but also constitutional problems of not having access to lawyers. We were having a significant problem with the court services unit, having the staff to transport people to the courtrooms. That would be exacerbated if we had more people in jail. We got an email yesterday, which is not an unusual email, telling us that there were 12 hearings for which they wouldn't be able to bring to court that morning. And we're oftentimes facing significant delays, but now we're getting into situations where we're just being told, sorry, we have all these cases sent out. And these are felony cases I'm talking about. These are folks who might be resolving their cases and being out of the jail, or folks who are asking for release and have a release hearing, or folks who have sentencing hearings and have victims there ready to participate in that hearing. And all of a sudden we're being told, well, you can either do WebEx, and we're really trying to be committed to ideas of procedural justice, and somehow having an important felony hearing while the defendant is appearing by WebEx is something that most of us just hate to do. And when we do it, it oftentimes, does not feel right. And so this stuff could, if we lose closed street quickly, it could really, it could impact a system that's under pressure already. Now, that's not to say, I'm the one that sort of brought the impetus of having this LIPSIC subcommittee on pretrial release a year and a half or so ago, because I knew our pretrial release system wasn't serving the community the way it should. We are just putting people on release, and so many people, you have to sort of spend a day observing our arraignment court to get the idea. We have people who are really sick standing up there about to be released from custody. People who have high acuity, who you just know as soon as they hit the streets, they're either going to be at significant risk of overdosing, or they're just going to be back doing what they did before. I've heard people beg me for help when I was releasing them, telling me that they just needed to go into detox. And of course, this was at a time when it was like, okay, show up at 7 in the morning at Hooper Detox every morning, and then maybe you'll get in. that just has no chance of succeeding. And I believe that if we had transitioned to a system that focused on case management in the jail, like they do in Clackamas County, and then a warm handoff to the resources we do have, with even priorities going to folks who are being released from custody, that would make judges feel much more comfortable, because people would have a chance to become stabilized, and then their lawyers could start working with them. They'd be able to be in touch with their lawyers, and they could start working through their cases. And when people get stabilized in pretrial, not only does it work out well in terms of them coming back to court, but it also works out well in terms of them having a much higher chance of getting a probation resolution to their case, because they're showing that they're engaging in services, and so they're not going to be as dangerous. And so it's just a win-win. Clackamas County, every single person released from their jail gets interviewed by their transition center. They sometimes start doing case management 2 weeks before they're released, and then they have a place for them to go when they are released, and they often take them to the place they need to go, whether that's treatment or housing or mental health services or what have you. So I think that's why we've been working so hard on this, is so that we're not putting so many of our resources into having corrections officers, just monitoring people on release. But I just fear if we don't stand up a system that will work better at this point, we'll just end up in a situation where many more people are being held in custody, because judges will just feel like it's not worth the risk releasing people. So those are the things I wanted to talk about, and some of that material is on slide 10 as well.
Can I ask, excuse me, in the executive summary I think for the first report, it says 54% of people 54% of people are released at arraignment, ROR, and that this suggests a group of individuals who may be relevant for pre-arraignment release, but who are not currently eligible. What is the there? It speaks to this kind of the system's overwhelmed, and so what are we missing that these folks aren't getting released prior? And I'm sorry if it's a long, I know there's two big, long reports, and I've at least skimmed them, but I didn't see anything addressing this in there.
So I really don't think 54% are being released on recognizance if they were not released by our release office prior to their arraignment. That just doesn't sound right. Most all of those people, if they're released, are either released to PSP or closed street supervision. We kind of rarely just release people on recognizance, but we do have a presiding release order. And the reason, we readjusted that last year sometime, because we had a high number of people failing to appear for their very first court appearance. And so we wanted to make sure they saw a judge before they were released. So that release order looks at things like the charges. And so the more serious charges, people are held to see a judge, the more serious felony charges. But also it looks at, have they failed to appear on the case before, or do they have a certain number of failure to appears in the last 3 years? And so we have that posted on our website. I think it makes sense as a document, because it basically says, if you fit into these categories where bad things are happening, or you're charged with a serious offense, then you have to see a judge before you're released.
I appreciate that sounds wrong, but I will say that's the data, from the data in our report, so it would be great to get some agreement there. If there's disagreement with the data in these reports, and it puts us in a really tough position to make actual recommendations for how to move this forward. So that, to me, a 54% is a high number, and so it begs the question for me, what are we missing? And if we're not, then maybe the language needs to be adjusted to more appropriately reflect what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to follow up on that. I'll also say, there's some locally developed overrides to the PRO, and I think it would be worthwhile to also look at some data around kind of who is being held under the current presiding judge's release order and just comparing that data to the data that's available in the report, because I think there is something there that we could dig deeper into.
Question. First of all, thank you for being here, both of you. And I really appreciate the suggestion of people going to arraignment court. I went about 2 years ago, and it actually was quite shocking, the people who were released, but understanding the strains in the system. But it was eye-opening, I think, for anybody in this community to sit in that courtroom for the afternoon. For a variety of reasons, people were released. I had a question about, you referenced Clackamas County. Who does that case management? Like, what part of the larger system?
So the sheriff runs the program, and the person who staffs it are primarily probation officers, because the probation department is under the sheriff in Clackamas County. And they have a variety of staff. They have folks that go in there and interview. They do LSCMIs, you know, the risk assessment for folks. They do ASAMs to see what the issues are for substance use disorder. They have people from the employment that work the employment side, the mental health side. They have a variety of people that they either contract with or that work in their transition center.
It's all coordinated through
the
sheriff's office.
And I think we're going to have Denise come down too, because she can explain a little bit too from their counterpart side.
Good morning, Denise Pena. I am the Director of the Department of Community Justice. I use she, her pronouns. I just want to clarify that Judge Greenlick is correct, that in Clackamas County, their community corrections is under the purview of the sheriff, not the Board of County Commissioners. With that said, though, as far as the transition center, it is not POs that are actually involved in the pretrial work with the transition center, because sworn adult and POs don't have any authority or jurisdiction over the pretrial population, only for those that have been convicted already, so the post-conviction work.
I should mention the transition center is not under their pretrial release office. That's done by the court. The focus of the transition center is to provide case planning for every single person being released from custody, whether they're just finishing a sentence or they're being released pretrial. So they'll provide this access to warm handoff for services, and then they'll also then go check in with their pretrial release office. So it is a PO that is in charge of the transition center. He's a probation officer, but you know, if you look on the letterhead, it's Clackamas County Sheriff on top.
Great. The other question, and this may, you can tell me, we can wait to the end of the presentation, but I'm curious about the data of the current system, of what we see, like whether closed street supervision is actually accomplishing the objectives that were set out originally. It looks like with the caseload increases, that would be impacted, but I'm just curious about what sort of data is collected in terms of people who are under closed street supervision, whether they show up for their hearings, what impacts on the victims, or what are the metrics? 'Cause for me, one of the things that I'll be looking at is that we transition. So if we're keeping some data currently and like what that's showing in terms of just outcomes. But if we transition to a new system, will that result in better outcomes? Not just who's doing it, is I think what I'll be curious to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. So I think that the Sheriff's Office sent some responses to that question around how they're measuring somebody who successfully completes closed street supervision. And I don't have the numbers pulled up in front of me, but I know that they were sent out to the board. And then who is not successfully completing, and then there's sort of some neutral response in there. And I think that the challenge has been really collecting consistent data across both agencies about failures to appear, and so and about new criminal activity while on pretrial release. So I think those are the two main outcomes that we're really looking for from a pretrial system. And we don't have those currently tracked in one place outside of the report that I think really does dive into some of the data and shows kind of some of those success metrics. I do think, though, that if we move towards a different system of monitoring where we had more manageable caseloads, where we were focused more on supportive services for those who were assessed at the highest risk, and really address some of the barriers that folks had to getting to court, we would see better outcomes. Because generally, I think what we see regularly in the research is that people aren't willfully not appearing at their court dates. It's really that there are all of these other barriers that are happening in people's lives that they're unable to make it to court, or they are disorganized, they don't have their court dates, and it's hard to track. And so I think if we're able to actually build a system that addresses some of those underlying barriers, we'll be able to see more success. And that's what we've seen in other programs around the country that really have shifted their focus from monitoring towards supportive services.
You know, I think the JSP, and again, I haven't had a chance to look at it carefully, but they said that 75% of the people booked into our jail in a 3-year period, a recent 3-year period, it was the second or third or fourth time they'd been booked during that period. So those are people either failing to appear for court or being arrested for new charges. So that's a pretty shocking number in my view, and it's showing that things aren't succeeding. I think there's some things we can do in the short term. We need to let folks who have been monitored by the PSP program, who are checking in for 3 or 4 months, to be off monitoring. There's no reason to have those folks monitoring. And the reason closed street supervision numbers are so high are not just because judges in some situations, if somebody's charged with like a robbery in the 3rd degree and they show up as a PSP and they're just not comfortable having them released without being on closed street, that happens. But what happens way more often is somebody with a really minor charge, like shoplifting, who shows as a 2 or a 3 because they failed to appear so many times, that person goes to closed street. And I think we could shift that by getting nonviolent misdemeanors into PSP. That would reduce closed street numbers so they could have a chance to be more successful with people, and then allow folks who are checking in on PSP to transition into just regular recognizance. And I think that would be something we could do really quickly and would benefit the courts.
Did you want to get through the last 2 slides and then we'll go to the rest for questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so next slide. We are, great. So at the same time that the pretrial subcommittee was meeting, we also had the justice system partners using both grant funds and general fund complete 3 reports. The first 2 have been released, the 3rd has not yet been started. So the first report was really an analysis of pretrial programs across the country to pull out enhanced practices that are showing more successful outcomes so that we could look at maybe potential alternatives to how we do things here. And there were a couple recommendations that came out of that report that I think are worth reading. So one is shifting from compliance-focused pretrial monitoring to supportive pretrial services. And that is reflected in a number of the successful pretrial programs that we see across the country, but also in the conversations that we've had at the pretrial subcommittee around what our partners think would help our system be more successful and individuals who are going through our system be served better. The second is establish separate support-focused programs separate from the legal system. I think the sheriff has talked about this a little bit as well, is that the sheriff's office is not the right place to have a pretrial monitoring program. And so seeing as they are interested in stepping away from providing pretrial services, really thinking about how we house those pretrial supportive services outside of the criminal legal system, recognizing again that these are folks who have not yet been convicted of a crime. And then implementing warm handoffs. This is something that we see in this best practice report that works really well in other jurisdictions. I was in San Francisco in July, and they actually walk people the 10 blocks from release from custody to their pretrial program, which is run by a nonprofit provider. And so they're really helping people take that first step to get there. And we see that happen in a lot of places where pretrial is present in court, at arraignments, and really making that connection for individuals so that we allow them to be successful, especially at that first kind of intake hearing or intake appointment. And then the last is establishing targeted support services. So really using a needs assessment to address individuals' basic needs, their housing needs, substance use needs, and accessibility needs so that they can be successful in appearing to court and really remain new criminal activity free. And then also just have some of those barriers addressed, as this is a point in the system where an individual could really benefit from just being wrapped in services. The second JSP report, which just came out at the end of last week, and so I didn't have time to incorporate it here, is really focused on our own data. So it involves both observations and interviews with folks in our system. It's an assessment of administrative data provided from all of our legal system partners, and then also an evaluation of our policies and procedures. So they really look through, and the way that it's written is showing it as a little bit of a report card to how we're doing currently in the context of this best practice report, so that we can use the two of them together to help really think through what we might want a new structure of pretrial monitoring to look like. The third report that we are paying for but has not yet been started is a cost analysis. So really looking at what the cost would be if we were to shift pretrial services to an independent agency. And so we have an opportunity there to really think about what we would want to have costed out. And so it operates very differently in different places around the country. Some of the models are operated as a contracted model through a nonprofit. We see some of our partners in Oregon who've shifted a lot of the pretrial to the court, and that really looks like the basic monitoring that we have now and not the supportive service element. So like the judge was saying in Clackamas, the court has the pretrial monitoring, supportive services are provided through the transition center, which is a contract with the sheriff's office. And then we also see places where they do an independent county department. So there's a number of different models that we have the opportunity to look at and to really cost out to ensure that the pretrial system is both effective and efficient. Next slide. So this slide is really focused on the next steps and the resources needed. And I think, we had planned this with being kind of a long-term transition. This proposal really sped that up, but I think it's important to think about what we may need to make sure that this is really thoughtful, recognizing that we have individuals who are currently monitored by these agencies that we need to be thinking about. We want to think about how to best manage our jail beds and ensure that there's an option for individuals to be released into the community and have connection to some sort of services and have a place where judges feel like they're able to actually release folks instead of feeling like holding them is the only option. And so I think that would take a dedicated project manager, regardless of what the transition looks like, into the next step to make sure that all system partners are included. This has been a really collaborative process thus far, and I would like to ensure that that continues to be so. Really reviewing all of the reports in depth to think about what options we might want to look at for a cost analysis to determine the direction moving forward, in combination with a recommendation from the LPSC pretrial subcommittee, which has all our partners at the table. And then I added in here just looking at the current funding. So what this board had approved in the budget to serve this pretrial population, which is about $3.7-ish million, just to kind of show that number of what we're paying for right now versus kind of what we're getting, right? Which is not a lot of successful outcomes. So as we start to think about the future, really thinking about that number and how much we've spent and dedicated to that. And then leaving time for a potential procurement if we're looking at outside services, program development, and developing a thoughtful transition plan so that we can ensure that we're transitioning in a way that is respectful of the individuals who are on pretrial monitoring, those who are working in our pretrial monitoring systems, and to all of our system stakeholders who rely on this service in the community. So given all of that, thinking that probably at minimum this would be a year-long process. So 4 to 6 months, and that was the proposal that's on the table, would be extremely difficult and probably near impossible to stand up something that would really help us to move forward. I think we would really risk deepening the problems that we are looking to solve.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Moore.
Looking at the different models and our budget reality currently and projected, I don't think it's feasible to count on $3.7 million, particularly in departments that have been squeezed significantly. I'm thinking about DCJ and the fact that they've kind of been hit on so many different levels. And in that context, I think we're gonna have to start having really difficult conversations about what are we legally mandated to do, what do we think is important to do, and what we can afford to do, and that is I guess the challenge we all signed up for. But within this, in a model where we want to get the best outcomes that we can with people showing up, not having discretion over what judges order, how do we weigh these different models? We also have, I think there would be legal challenges from going from a internal represented unit of workers to an external nonprofit. I think we would likely have a lawsuit because I think they'd be able to make an argument that was to save money. So within kind of a context of that reality, where have the conversations been about the balance between the best outcome and what we can actually fund?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, we haven't started those conversations yet, to be honest with you. We just had these reports released earlier this month, and we've been having the conversations at the pretrial subcommittee for about a year, really thinking about kind of the priorities of what we want to see in a future system. I think as we continue to have these conversations, particularly around how we want to drive the cost analysis forward, we're going to start to dig more deeply into that. I think labor issues are definitely front and center of everybody's mind when we're thinking about transitioning services, and all of those considerations we're going to have to start to address. I will say also, the reports are not just aimed at how we as the county can improve the services that we stand up to support individuals pretrial, but they also have some details on how we can improve kind of the larger pretrial legal system as a whole. So really looking at court processes and ways that we can increase efficiencies in other places. So I think this is going to be a larger system conversation, both about what our priorities are, what we fund, what the budget is that's available, and then how we can identify other efficiencies in our system that might help alleviate some of the pressure on these pretrial monitoring programs. For instance, looking at a population of individuals who actually may not need to be monitored at all, and really thinking about how do we focus in our resources on those individuals who have experienced, 2, 3, 4 bookings or higher levels of failures to appear that we might want to concentrate services on.
I guess one of my questions is, within the pretrial process, sometimes I think for lower level offenses, but yet people who fail to appear repeatedly, that the answer might not be trial, but it might be deflection or some diversion, not deflection. Something where we acknowledge the significant barriers an individual has. We don't wait. Obviously this is something that someone agrees to, but we send them on their path to recovery to some degree with potentially a charge hanging, so that we're not spending a tremendous amount of resources trying to get them to show up to trial, to then maybe go to mental health court, or go to drug court, or go to something else. I just, I want us to also think a little bit around like what is the goal with the individual. I mean, there's situations that are clearly there's a need for justice for the community and the victim. Then there are situations in which potentially the best outcome is a person addressing a very serious issue in their lives. So I think about that because I think, are we spending a lot of resources and effort that could be better spent just going that path before we have to wait a year with supervision and a court date and all of that?
What path are you referring to, please?
Not necessarily an existing, but like if we had more diversion options that are, in lieu of adjudication, you complete X, Y, Z, and then your charges are dropped. You don't complete.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Judge.
I was just going to say, we've run programs like that in the past. We used to have a community court program. For whatever reason, it didn't work. The district attorney makes charging decisions. The court doesn't have authority to dismiss cases unless we find there's been some constitutional or statutory violation, or unless they're asking us to dismiss the case. So I'm always open to having those conversations to see if we could structure something for the minor, low-level offenses that would work better for everyone. But it's obviously a conversation we have to have with others as well.
I just wanted, I agree with you. Earlier you said there's some short-term fixes, and I think that there's even more that I read in these reports that are short-term fixes, like the fact that the formatting of the RAO is not useful for judges seems like super low-hanging fruit to me to fix, that it's actually usable information. And there's these longer-term pieces that, I'm hearing you say a year we could transition some of this work. Will we be able to do both some of these short-term fixes and the longer-term transition work within that 12-month period? Do we have the capacity to hold both of those at the same time?
I would say yes, and I would say yes because we have this collaborative group of stakeholders who is coming to the table through this Lipstick Pretrial Subcommittee to address some of those challenges. However, just kind of like the previous question, there are other partners involved in this. And so something like the RAO interview would be the responsibility of the court to make changes to, because that's something that they own. So really identifying kind of what those immediate changes could be, who actually has ownership and the power over them, and then whether or not there's power within that system to fix it, given whatever kind of limitations that they may have. So I think yes, because we have the collaboration that is fairly strong at that table, and it's going to take other partners to be willing to make changes to those things.
I love that, and I think that for me is the route to go with this, because while we'd like to have more time, we are also doing this in the context of budget rebalance, right? So there's actually some urgency involved as well, and so that's a piece that I think is critical, that we can both do some of the short term to alleviate the existing pressure, but also knowing that this 4 to 6 month timeline won't necessarily work to do the intentional longer term transitions that are needed. It brings me back to what I said last week, that this is really looking at, on the budget rebalance side of things, we need to rethink the sheriff's current proposal, and I know that she had looked at multiple options for this budget rebalance, but we need to figure out how to keep Close Street open so we can do this with intentionality, but also give us the opportunity to fix some of what feels like some low-hanging fruit right now.
So this is a sort of a question for our proceedings. So when I'm looking at this slide 11, is this a rebalance proposal, at least the project manager? No.
No.
Okay, so because we're having a rebalance discussion and there's a resource request here, I wasn't sure if that was, so that's good to know, because I really think as we move ahead. I really appreciate here's some alternatives that may get better outcomes for all involved, which is, I think, what should be our overarching goal. Assuming the sheriff is going to move forward with, this is not something she's going to continue to do, it seems like having a proposal that comes out of, that has the courts, the DA, the sheriff, DCJ, LIPSIC, sort of involved in like, here's what we think the transition looks like, would be really helpful. Because I know the subcommittee has been meeting. I'm not sure it was meeting in the context of there may be a proposal to end closed street supervision, so maybe there's like some added urgency into an accelerant into the discussion, but that would be what would be most helpful for me, because I don't see, I'm just going to sort of echo Commissioner Moyer, that these resources necessarily would just transition over to a new system. And I think from my perspective is thinking about the need to there's still needing to be some oversight. And I think this is sort of the laying down the challenge of the county is like this, the warm handoff to services. Those are services in many cases that might be county-based services. And so, you know, what is the county doing, the other departments that may be providing support for us to align existing resources behind this versus like we're going to stand up a whole new system versus we know that we have some of those resources that people need, and how are we facilitating the warm handoff into the county system?
I agree, Commissioner. I think my point earlier is I don't even know that it's new resources for these folks, that I have an inkling that a lot of the folks we're talking about are already receiving county services, but the fact that we don't know those Venn diagrams doesn't actually let us understand how much new resource might be needed, because I think that's so critical for us to know and figure out, and not in like it needs to be a huge 10-month-long data project, in that this is let's look at the actual people with their names and have some case staffing conversations across these departments and get this piece figured out, because that can tell us longer term how we need to align systems so that it doesn't always have to be a let's go back and fix it.
Yeah, very much an and conversation. And that's something that we can, like, in the very short term, do to understand that. So if there are people, like, what's the marginal or the delta of what's needed?
I think the important thing, though, with this population, and really, this is going back a little bit earlier to I think it was the first slide that showed the 3 goals of the subcommittee, and those are really like obvious key performance indicators. The fact that there weren't goals attached to those indicators, like I think that's something that we really have to work on, because because that way that's going to tell us the data that we need to have access to really figure out, are these investments that are being made, whether it is the current system or any future system, actually making the difference that they need. And I do think that there is overlap between this population and some county services, and it'd be worthwhile to take a look at those. But for me, it's the intention of the work, and making sure that the intention around pretrial services to help people not commit crimes during that period, to show up for courts as they're required to do, right? Like that is really the crux of this work. And so I think that if they are engaging in other programs or services, we can't lose that connection to really what we're trying to achieve with this population for this purpose too. So I think just because they're going to a service over here doesn't necessarily mean that service is going to be with the same goal in mind. I think the other piece for me is, we're putting money into certain, like, public defenders to do case management for, I'm sure, a very similar population. And I'm curious if we have any data there about, are the folks that are getting these case management services from the public defenders, are they having better appearance rates? Are they not having lower, criminal activity rates while they're, like, that to me will be helpful, because it feels like that is kind of like the model. There are similarities to what is being looked at and proposed.
So, and that's what I asked earlier, and so I think it's the same thing. I want to, the piece that you said before you asked your question, I think that in the reports, a large part of the frustration of staff is their inability to actually provide the services that they know people need. And so while it may not be the service provision as a primary goal of pretrial services, it clearly is a hindrance to actually having people be successful. And so I don't want to disjoint the two in the way that this to me is what one county would mean. You touch the county, all of our services are wrapped around you, but we also are able to see if you're already getting services. And so that's why I keep harping on this point that I think we're missing opportunity where folks are already engaged with us to provide the wraparound supports that are being identified as barriers to success in this program.
Yeah, and my point was more like, I just want us to not lose the tracking, the data, because there seems to be a disconnect right now with the current system and our ability to track the data and the outcomes. And I want to make sure that we keep that very strongly, or create it, since it's not there right now.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important. And, part of what we've seen in other places, for example, when I was in San Francisco, seeing that they actually had kind of this nonprofit model that was really focused on funding the case managers, and then the services were existing services that would come and either be co-located in their building, or now they serve as a housing access point for the housing that's available through the city and county of San Francisco. And so really looking at opportunities like that, and I think referencing that kind of one county model is exactly what that would be. But having that person that's focused on those pretrial outcomes to navigate somebody through all of those services, because I think that's really missing right now, really tracking what's happening with their case to make sure that they, have the transportation they need to get to court, have childcare, maybe they need, a place to store their belongings, things like that I think we could easily rely on simple existing services to engage in, and then somebody to navigate them through that process.
And I know that the costs for what this looked like that's still like that missing piece that we need to understand. I did appreciate you putting up what we're currently spending. That is the allocation that we have given to this work right now in this fiscal year. Obviously, we're having a conversation based on the changes at the state level for, different programs that aren't pretrial work, but I think that's good context to keep in mind. I do think, though, that, and Commissioner Singleton, you referred to this a little bit earlier, I do think that if we are not comfortable with the path for closing down closed street supervision in the next 4 to 6 months, we do have to figure out then what is the work of this board in terms for the sheriff's office for the lack of the 1145 funding. Because these are very specifically around jail beds, and there were a couple different options, but I think that is something that we're going to need to be thinking about if we decide not to go this route.
I should just mention, I don't know exactly how their transition center is funded, where they get all the funds, but I think they rely primarily on 1145 funds. And they're showing great success there in terms of cases resolving for probation, people coming to court and being less likely to reoffend during the time the case is pending. So it could just be reallocation in that way as well, I suppose.
Do you have any idea if the Clackamas is using how much of Clackamas is using $1145 for jail beds?
I don't.
Yeah, okay,
but I asked them how they funded their transition center, and I think they got a big chunk of it from that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I'm going to keep top of mind is just going back to the sort of your initial comments of many of the individuals on closed street supervision. There are very serious charges related to why they're on closed street supervision. So I don't want to lose that. I mean, I think absolutely want to help individuals receive the services they needed that will allow them to show up in court and address any other issues they have, whether it's housing or treatment. I also want to just remember, because the sort of statement you made at the very beginning of like putting the judges in the position of if there's not that option, that there are individuals who have very serious charges who are being released into that, and if there's not close street supervision, what happens to them? And I think there's this duality of sort of protecting the community and also supporting an individual with some services they need in order to get on their road to treatment and get back integrated into the community. So for me, that will be a really high priority. Hold on to those two pieces. I would be interested, I don't know, Sarah, if you can get the sort of more data from Clackamas County about their outcomes or how they measure that. Again, considering this duality of community safety, but also helping the individual who's traveling through the system and maybe needs services in order to get on a different track.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up and get that data from Clackamas. I also believe there's a lot of data around success in that First Step Forward report, looking at what other jurisdictions are doing, where they are often engaging individuals who have those higher level charges in these more supportive services and case management models, and really seeing a lot of success in terms of reducing that new criminal activity, so protecting public safety and getting their cases adjudicated. I think it's also worth mentioning, and this is from that second report that came out last week, is that right now, because Close Street is so overburdened, the deputies reported that they are largely not doing anything beyond what PSP is doing right now. And that is just phone check-ins. So I think that there is sort of this historical understanding that Close Street was doing a lot more in terms of going out into the field and doing home visits and doing all of these other things. And that in reality is just not happening right now and hasn't happened for a long time because of the level of cases that they have there right now. So
can I just ask a question? Yeah. You said they're not doing anything different than the pretrial services program, which is, according to this matrix, once per month by phone. So you're saying that's what Close Street is right now? It's not either level 2 every other week, or level 3 once a week, or level 3+, which is once a week by phone, or once per month in person? So you're saying it's just once a month by phone?
So they're still just doing the phone check-ins is all I'm saying. They're not doing any of the like beyond what's on the chart, sort of going out into the field, things that they had previously been doing.
So just make sure it's more often, but it's by phone. So you're saying it's not, there's no in-person and no electronic monitoring?
That the electronic monitoring is still happening and the scram is still happening. So things in that chart are still happening, but previously I think there was a lot of trust in Close Street and a lot of comfortability because they were doing things like home visits and all of that, kind of having those more in-person meetings. And then when we look at the JSP report and they actually talk to folks at Close Street, they were seeing that because of their huge caseloads, they were unable to do anything beyond what is on that chart.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that does. Thank you.
The way Close Street used to operate as well is that they would do an investigation before a judge made the release decision. So they'd go talk to the person, do some case management, and go call their mom and go visit their home, and then come back to court and say, hey, I think we got this. That's all gone now because of the numbers.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you both so much for this. This was really helpful in both what we're doing right now, but I think longer term as we're thinking about this really important piece of our justice system and how folks are engaging or should be engaging with our system. So thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
No, my bad. Just two questions. I didn't mean to get your attention by shaking my microphone. Yeah, no, I was reading. So when will the cost analysis report be completed, the next report, and when will it be shared with the board?
Yeah, great question. So they haven't started that because we actually need to determine what we would like them to look at. And so we could ask them to look at, say, what happens if we, contract out to a nonprofit model. We can ask them to look at what if it is housed within an existing county department. We could look at if it's consolidated under one agency. So we actually have the opportunity to shape that, and so we'll be starting to have those discussions over the next month. And then I think once we give them some parameters, it'll probably take about 3 weeks. I'll also say that around the same time in November, we'll also be receiving our first validation of the public safety assessment. So we'll have even more pretrial data for us all to look at and consider. And then I think we could probably present that to the board soon after, once we have all 3 reports.
So rough estimate, like February, January?
I would hope earlier, probably December or January.
Got it. And then how much, for a project manager, roughly, what's the cost for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can make a guesstimate, but I think I'll rather follow up with you with some numbers.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then again, everything that Commissioner Singleton that you pointed out, just looking at what should we, or could we be doing internally as far as connecting folks to services? Do we have a representative currently, like from the Department of Human Services, a part of the the subcommittee?
We don't at this point, but I think now that we are moving towards like a quicker timeline and looking at this, I think we can think about who we might want to bring into that subcommittee to help inform some of that.
Got it. Yeah, that's a good flag. And then we've been talking a lot about just technology to manage and connect folks to services. That's another reason why I've, as you know, continue to bring it up. So I'll say it again on the record. That's extremely important and will, I believe, help mitigate a lot of some of the challenges that we're facing. Judge Greenlick, thank you for just your contributions and representation and helping us to see the full picture as well, and everyone else that's been participating. So thank you. Thank you, Sam.
I just also wanted to appreciate, Sarah, the conversations we've had as well. And thank you, Judge, not just for coming today, but your letter was really helpful for me to understand the impact across different systems. So just appreciate you engaging in this with us. And I think we've got some really cool opportunity here to do something different that serves the public at large, but also the human beings who are in this system. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes left. Were there any other questions around the state rebalance work, the budget work that folks had questions about? We have folks from the departments here to help answer questions. But just wanted to open it up.
Were you going to say something? So I'm just curious about how we're going to approach, so we have scheduled October 16th for the budget modifications actually coming forward. And it would be helpful to have visibility more than the Wednesday before, just in terms of how this particular program. So for example, the sheriff comes in with this isn't something that I'm resourced to do, and not going to continue to do it. How is it that we're going to build this sort of bridge to a new system? Because it's my understanding that the sheriff's office, because of the reductions in 1145, are already spending money they don't actually have. And so I'm just curious about how we're going to build this ladder to a new system. So and it seems like it's not through just voting on some budget modifications.
I think it's, and it came up when the sheriff was here last week, I think, where thinking about the 6 months, it's both, or the 12 months needed to do this, it's both what's for this fiscal year, but what might also be a one-time only ask for 27, so that we actually have an understanding of that full range.
Yeah, so that would be useful. Again, so if we just had a set of budget modifications that are, here's how we're going to deal with the rebalance, to me, that wouldn't be enough. So I just want to make sure that's what we're going to get, something that's in addition to, like, hey, here's the rebalance, because it's not confined just to a rebalance conversation as we heard this.
So I think it depends on, so the materials, and I'm looking to Christian for this. So Wednesday, tomorrow, is when we would be getting the budget modifications for review for the board for the materials for next week. And I'm just looking to make sure that that's timeline. Yep, she's nodding for that timeline. So tomorrow is when the budget modifications that we would be contemplating for Thursday, next Thursday would be
And
shared with
if
us.
we wanted, based on this conversation, a different approach, is that an amendment to, I don't, because it's not an ordinance, so I'm trying to understand.
It seems like it might be
if we-
additive.
So I think we could take a look at the budget modifications for the sheriff's office, and then there are alternative budget modifications that we could do. Like, for instance, if we're like, well, at this point, taking money out of contingency is something rather than closing Close Street, right? That would be a new budget modification that the budget office would help create.
So we'd have options, or we would move that forward?
I think it would
We can
be
talk
great.
openly, right?
I was just, no, we can, I mean, this is
Yeah,
where we
so I'm
should be
asking.
talking about it. Yeah, so I think like if that's something that the board would like to have brought forward, I think that that's something that would be great to know as soon as possible so that we can start working on that budget modification.
I mean, I think, I won't speak for myself, but I heard others. I think having a 12-month off-ramp versus a 4 to 6 month off-ramp, I think gives us at least an opportunity to approach this with a level of thoughtfulness and hopefully, I mean, it would put pressure, but I think sometimes pressure is needed to like figure out a new system moving forward. I mean, and I agree with Commissioner Singleton of like, there's the immediate things and then there's the like, okay, clock is ticking, figure it out, where I agree with a 4 to 6 month time period, that is not doable.
Yeah. And then I do, and I don't know where Sarah, there she is. No, other Sarah. Sarah Mullins, she left. But she's like, I'm out of here. But I do think, so I wanted, like, the timeline originally was for FY27, right? For to take a look at the pretrial assessment and to really kind of reconfigure it to match what to better serve the folks and better serve the system. So that is definitely something that I think was on the table. It was just that this really drove the conversation much further. But we do have some choices in terms of how we deal with this budget shortfall for the sheriff's office that don't necessarily rely on this. There are strengths and weaknesses, I think, to all the proposals when we're trying to fill a gap from the.
I mean, if the sheriff's comfortable, I would like to see one that includes a contingency ask to keep closed streets open for the year that's needed to do this.
What were you going to say?
Good morning, Kristen Elkin, County Budget Director. I use she, her pronouns. One of the things that we did do is we held a little bit of time on the 23rd in addition to the 16th in case there were things that needed to take a little bit more time to resolve. So we could make the suggestion to you all that we go forward with all the bud mods and then bring the one on the 23rd in relation to the sheriff's office to give us time to talk to them, to work through what that means for their office, this proposal that you all are putting on the table. I'm looking over at John, sorry. So we could make that recommendation today to make sure that we're getting all the pieces and parts lined up and that we're bringing it to you as kind of a completed package with also involvement from the sheriff's office at that time. That would be something that we could do. They are submitting their bud mods in, every department's submitting most of their bud mods in just one big package. The sheriff's office is submitting theirs in 3, so there's the Troutdale piece, there's the Oregon Marine Board, and then there's the piece related to Close Street. So we could do the other 2 and then just hold that one, or we could move as quickly as possible and bring them all on the 16th.
I want to acknowledge that I felt a sense of urgency from the sheriff, so if we can make it happen and the timeline works for them, then I'd love to have it all on the 16th.
And just to add to that, the challenge with doing it on the 23rd is the 16th, things would already have been submitted for the following, because the meeting's on Thursday, things would have already been submitted for the following week. So it seems like it seems like it would be useful to hear from the sheriff's office, like what would be, if we were contemplating this transition, what, from their perspective, how they see the off-ramp happening in a way that allows them to deliver their core services they still need to, and help us with this transition.
One thing, the elected officials have a 1 week prior to the agenda deadline, and so we were honoring that with the sheriff's office as well. So you don't have those bud mods yet. They're turning them in tomorrow.
Good morning.
Good morning. John Harms, Sheriff's Office. I'm sure Christian's got this. I just really missed you all, and I wanted to come back up and speak again. I just wanted to clarify on the point about where we are in terms of the off-ramp. This is a bit of, I think, for us at least, the issue of the rebalance as well as pretrial reform have gotten really intertwined in the last couple of weeks. But prior to meeting to address the rebalance gap, we were not, the off-ramp had a much longer tail in our mind, and we've been an active participant in that collaboratory group. Certainly, I mean, 12 months or longer for an off-ramp is what we've understood from those pretrial conversations. We would absolutely love to have contingency to extend that timeline. We were prepared to make the mechanics of that work within the 16th deadline. Absolutely.
All right, thank you, John. All right, thank you. Thank you, Christian. Okay, any other things?
So just clarify, it's going to happen primarily on the 16th.
Yes, that's the plan. There was like a, break glass in case of emergency, but the 16th is really what we're aiming for to get this work done. Okay, great.
I just wanted to appreciate the staff. It's been I know we've had a couple of meetings and work sessions, and y'all have been here for all of that, even if we're not talking about your department. So just appreciate I know you're working while you're here, but just the dedication to making sure we have what we need to make informed decisions. So thank you all.
Yay, thank you, Valdez. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right, thank you. So this is our last scheduled budget work session. So again, yes, appreciate everybody here and just all of the work to get answers to the questions. Those have been coming in, which have been incredibly helpful for all of us as we're thinking about these things. So appreciate that. Our next meeting is going to be on regular board meeting scheduled for Thursday, October 9th at 9:30 a.m. There being no further business, we are adjourned.